Move on to a story that I'm still up in the air about how I'm gonna respond.
The room falls silent, uncomfortably silent. Funky's eyes tighten almost imperceptibly. His posture hardens, and for a brief moment, he pauses before speaking again. What comes next isn't gossip. It's a break, a crack in the atmosphere. A shift in energy that sounds less like a blogger talking and more like someone confronting a truth they can't avoid anymore. Funky suggests that Tamar knows exactly how to provoke a situation and then retreat just far enough to avoid accountability. He avoids naming anyone at first. He doesn't have to. The tension grows in the space he deliberately leaves unfilled. In the restraint he maintains until he finally lets it collapse. You was a bold-faced, bald-headed goddamn liar. Each word lands sharply, soaked in anger and betrayal. At this point, it's no longer commentary. It's personal. It's direct. And it's rooted in a night Funky insists he never even wanted to be part of. A party he says she had no right hosting. A house he had no desire to return to. A car ride that ended with Tamar sitting on someone else's lap. A moment that pushed him to walk away entirely. Viewers immediately rewind, freeze-framing the exact second he says it. The name appears clear and unmistakable. Not hinted, not implied, not framed as an allegation. Mendeecees Funky explains why he refused to go upstairs and claims Mondays went instead. Just like that. In an instant, the narrative splinters. What once felt like a simple interview clip of Tamar playing confused transforms into a war zone of suggestion and implication. Funky claims interview.
You do just enough that when somebody calls you on it, then you can dip your hands back and be like, I didn't.
He says he watched Tamar and Mendeecees kissing in the backseat of that car. That's when he walked away because something didn't feel right. When she went upstairs, he claimed she wasn't alone. Within hours, timelines exploded. Threads flooded with speculation. Phrases like career-ending cover-up and HIV leak began circulating not as confirmed facts, but as panic-driven narratives. Then comes the most unsettling word yet. Arrested. No verification. No denial. Just silence. And tonight, that silence is louder than any statement. Because if Yandi truly broke down after what Funky revealed, that emotional collapse was genuine, then the question becomes unavoidable. What is Mendeecees hiding? And what happens when the rumors spiral beyond control? The edge is clearly in sight. What lies beneath it remains unclear. Early on, there's a moment when Funky leans back, not in comfort, but with intention. He's withholding something. And you can see it written all over his face.
Mendeecees and his homeboy, okay? Now, this is the third time that me and you have been hanging out, and out of nowhere, here comes Mendeecees, okay? I say, y'all, I really don't want to go. I drive my car over the sauce. By the time I get the sauce, Zoe calls and says, Tamar said, just leave your car at her house and we gonna go to V12. I didn't even want to go.
Now I'm going to respond to Tamar. That pause says everything. It's the final second of control before a monologue that intensifies with every word. Within moments, courtesy disappears, replaced first by irritation, then resolve, and finally something that feels dangerously close to an admission. Funky admits he's conflicted about how to address Tamar at all. From the start, he frames his response with precision, not as someone speculating, not as an outsider piecing things together, but as someone who was present, someone who never intended to speak, yet feels pushed into it. The night in question is one Tamar later referenced in an interview, describing it only in blurred, non-committal language. She claimed she didn't fully understand what happened. She said she attended a friend's birthday party, returned home, washed her face, and then everything became unclear. Funky rejects it outright. The uncertainty, the narrative. He doesn't believe any of it.
You were saying, let's go out and continue to hang for your birthday, or it's your birthday, let's hang. But to create this narrative.
Without softening his tone, he calls her out directly. You do just enough. He says just enough that when someone confronts you, you can pull your hands back and claim you didn't do anything at all. Funky accuses Tamar of being deliberate, even strategic in her behavior. What follows isn't the measured frustration of a media figure. It's the exposed irritation of someone who believes they were played. And viewers picked up on it immediately. The comment sections began repeating the same conclusion. Funky wasn't acting. He was correcting the record. There was exhaustion in his voice, a heaviness that made it clear he wasn't there to perform. He was there to tell the truth as he knew it. He starts walking through the night not as hearsay, but as lived experience. He insists it was never Tamar hosting a party for him. The entire storyline about her throwing a celebration for a friend only to be wronged later, he labels as fiction. According to Funky, Tamar called him simply looking for a place to eat. She brought Zoe along, and then, without warning, Mendeecees and his friends suddenly showed up. Funky says this wasn't a one-time occurrence. It wasn't the first time Mendeecees appeared unexpectedly when Tamar was around. This was the third time it was just you, me, and Zoe, he recalls. And out of nowhere, here comes Mendeecees. He doesn't spell out the implication. He doesn't need to. The audience fills in the blanks. The word coincidence quietly exits the room. Funky continues, describing how Mendeecees repeatedly arrived. Unannounced during outings with Tamar, what begins as a simple timeline shifts into suspicion. Suspicion turns into motive. Motive turns into outrage. By the time Funky reaches the part where Tamar insisted he leave his car and ride with them to a club called V12, viewers are already questioning the entire night. He didn't want to go. He made that clear.
After her and Mendeecees got through kissing in the back of that goddamn car, I figured they wanted to be up there privately. That is why when we got dropped off at Tamar's house, I did not go upstairs. I got in my damn car and went home because you was sitting on his lap in that goddamn Uber and y'all ass was kissing. Okay, and the shit made me damn uncomfortable. It's Mendeecees and his best friend because they was the ones who went upstairs with you. Now, I don't know whether they...
But according to Funky, Tamar pushed the night forward anyway. That's where everything changes. When they left the club and the group ended up back at Tamar's house, Funky never went inside. He's very clear about the reason. He says Tamar and Mendeecees were kissing in the back of that car. Not just close. Not just talking. She was sitting on his lap, and the moment crossed a line. It made him uncomfortable enough to walk away entirely. Funky explains that his decision not to go upstairs had nothing to do with confusion or hesitation. It was a reaction to what he witnessed. Tamar and Mendeecees kissing openly in the car. What follows that clip is silence, heavy, unsettling silence. Because until that moment, everything had felt chaotic, dramatic, and messy. Now it carries weight. This wasn't rumor. It was observed behavior, physical contact, and most chilling of all, privacy. Funky implies they wanted to be alone, and so he removed himself. He says it plainly, without sarcasm or flair. I figured they wanted to be up there privately. By that point, comment sections had already begun to fracture. Some fans demanded Tamar explain herself. Others begged Yandi to respond. A third group started asking darker questions, whether this went beyond infidelity, whether the rumors surrounding Tamar's health and Mendeecees' name appearing alongside them were about to spiral into something irreversible. Funky's next statement doesn't calm anything. It accelerates the fire. He doesn't hint. He declares, if anybody knows what happened to your damn teeth, he says, it's Mendeecees and his best friend. Because they were the ones who went upstairs with you. Funky states directly that Mendeecees and his friend were the ones who followed Tamar upstairs. The comment doesn't confirm an incident. It doesn't make a direct accusation, but the association alone is explosive. Online users begin using words like incident, injury, and most dangerously, cover-up. Within hours, Funky and Mendeecees are trending together. One side of the internet insists Funky is finally telling the truth, exposing what they believe had been hidden all along. The other side accuses him of reckless speculation meant to destroy reputations. Either way, the outcome is identical. Silence from Tamar. Silence from Mendeecees. And in this environment, silence isn't interpreted as restraint. It's read as guilt. Funky circles back, explaining that he never wanted to speak publicly. That he told Tamar to leave him alone. That she didn't. So now he says, let's be like this. His voice tightens not from emotion, but from control. He's holding himself back, but the frustration still leaks through, especially when he mentions Yandi. The only person who has done wrong in this situation is Yandi, Funky says. Then he stops. No explanation. No follow-up. But for viewers, it's enough. By now, they're reconstructing the timeline in real time. Tamar's unexplained health scare. The cryptic statements, the party she claimed to host, the blood she said she woke up in, the refusal to call an ambulance, the silence afterward, then Funky's account of Mendeecees going upstairs with her dot, and beneath it all, the resurfacing of older whispers rumors that had been circulating quietly for weeks. Mentions of a leaked health status, a report, a moment of silence, someone's husband in the room, nothing proven, nothing confirmed. But in the age of perception, speculation doesn't need facts. It only needs momentum. Funky never says HIV. He never says arrest. But viewers doing hashtags, edits, and reposted clips. And suddenly, the question isn't about the husband anymore. What no one truly knows isn't whether something happened that night. It's whether the silence surrounding it is shielding something far bigger. One of the final impressions Funky leaves behind isn't Angrit's resignation. Call me messy, he says. I'll be that. And that may be the most unsettling moment of all, because it doesn't sound defiant. It sounds like someone accepting the price of speaking up, even if the consequences spiral beyond his control by the time the first wave of reaction videos, opinion pieces, and stitched clips hits the timeline. The damage is already underway. Not to tomorrow. Not even just to Funky, but to Mendeecees. A name now trending beside phrases like investigated, arrested, and career over. No one confirms anything. No one outright denies it either. And in that vacuum where clarity refuses to exist, perception takes root and spreads unchecked. Now all attention turns to Yandi. If the rumors are false, then her silence looks like restraint. But if the betrayal is real, then her silence doesn't feel strategic at all. It feels like someone shattered. And if she ever speaks, this story changes again. Because once that wall cracks, the scrutiny won't stop at Tamar and Mendeecees. It will extend to everyone who watched quietly while the narrative unfolded on its own. The unraveling doesn't happen all at once. It builds slowly, fueled by what remains unsaid. Funky never gives the audience a complete picture. He doesn't need to. He offers fragments, names, movements, moments, emotions. The rest is assembled by viewers who now treat every second of the clip like evidence. They rewind. They pause. They study his expressions, his hands, the hesitations between sentences. Every detail becomes data. What unsettles people most isn't accusation, it's precision. Funky doesn't speak in generalities. He describes being asked to abandon his car and ride elsewhere. He explains how he offered Ruth's Chris because nothing else was open. How they moved from place to place, restaurant to restaurant, until they ended up back at Tamar's house. These aren't rumors. They're coordinates. And within those coordinates, fear grows. Because if Funky's timeline is accurate, if Mendeecees showed up multiple times unannounced, if Tamar was physically on his lap in that Uber, then viewers begin wondering what else was deliberately omitted from Tamar's version. In her interview, she framed the night as confusion. She said she didn't know what happened, that she woke up unaware, remembering only a party and coming home. Funky challenges that portrayal directly. And with visible frustration, he references Tamar saying she woke up in a pool of blood and nearly died, that someone allegedly offered to call an ambulance and she refused. And here, the tone shifts sharply. Because what Funky is suggesting isn't exaggeration, it's curation. That the story wasn't unclear. It was shaped. And that accusation cuts deeper than any insult. This isn't about confusion anymore. It's about control. There is no real world, Funky says, where somebody busts out the front of their mouth and then claims they woke up in a pool of blood and almost died. There's no humor in his voice. Just cold disbelief layered with resentment. His frustration isn't rooted in gossip, but in the belief that he was turned into a prop for a storyline he never agreed to participate in. Collateral damage in someone else's media storm. Viewers notice something else too. Funky doesn't accuse Tamar of being lost or unaware. He accuses her of being intentional. He says she enjoys going online, stirring confusion, and watching the chaos grow. That framing forces everything into a new light. The birthday party. The car ride, the Uber, the lap, the kiss, the silence. Not as isolated moments, but as setup. He presses the point further. If Tamar had truly been harmed, if something traumatic had genuinely occurred, she wouldn't be vague. She wouldn't hide behind "I don't know what happened" and dramatic references to calling Olivia Benson. He says it half sarcastically, but what the audience hears is exhaustion. What he's really saying is simple. She knew enough to go public. And she knew enough to protect certain people. And that's where the most disturbing layer forms. Because according to Funky, the person truly wronged here isn't Tamar. It isn't even him. It's Yandi. He mentions her only once, near the end. But the line lands with force. The only person who was done wrong in this situation is Yandi. That single statement reshapes everything. If Mendeecees was present that night, he left with Tamar, went upstairs with her, then Yandi stands outside this story not because she was distant, but because she was deceived. From there, a new wave of rumors emerges. Whispers of a breakdown, tears, confrontations behind closed doors. None confirmed, but speculation becomes its own storm. An old clip of Yandi resurfaces from an unrelated moment. Her voice cracking as she says, "I've been lied to before, but not like this." No source, but it spreads anyway, because the internet doesn't require proof when it senses pain. Funky's voice continues, looping over edits describing the car ride. The kiss. Why he never went upstairs. Then comes his most direct implication yet. Funky states that Mendeecees and his companion were the ones who went upstairs with Tamar. He presents it not as rumor, but as recollection, as something he believes he witnessed not just once, but repeatedly. He admits he was never comfortable with the dynamic between Tamar and Mendeecees. The meetings, the body language, the video shoot. It wasn't one night. It was a pattern. That's when perception flips. Viewers stop asking if something happened that night and start asking how many nights came before it. There's a pause in Funky's monologue, one of the few. His tone softens. "I don't like how you're trying to flip this and make it seem like I did you wrong," he says. "I'm still hurt by all of this." That moment humanizes him. It stops feeling like an attack and starts sounding like a plea for accountability. From there, sides are chosen. Some believe Tamar weaponized ambiguity to shield herself. Others argue Funky made a private situation explosive by speaking publicly. But nearly everyone agrees on one thing. Mendeecees' silence now feels intentional, especially as his name trends beside the word arrested. Never confirmed. Never stated by Funky, but perception has already blurred the line at a certain point. The story stops being about Tamar. It stops being about Funky. Even Mendeecees fades into the background. Because once the public believes a truth has been hidden, one tied to betrayal, injury, and silence, they stop waiting for facts. They start building conclusions. And the momentum began not with rage, but with calculation. With Funky's words. And once that momentum takes hold, it doesn't slow down. He accuses Tamar of deliberately shaping the public narrative to cast herself as the victim. In his version, she positioned him as the disloyal friend, the opportunist, the one who failed her when it mattered. But Funky argues that this framing didn't happen by accident. He says Tamar crafted the storyline, dropped just enough implication to spark outrage, and then stepped back far enough to avoid direct responsibility. "You were done so wrong," he repeats mockingly. "You were betrayed by a friend." Then, his voice sharpens. "If anything, I was the collateral damage in your story." According to Funky, he wasn't the villain, he was the sacrifice. By this point, the comment sections aren't just engaging, they're dividing. But the split isn't strictly Funky versus Tamar. It's between what's being said and what's being withheld. And the most repeated name across every thread isn't either of them. It's Yandi. The woman at the center of the storm has said nothing. No tweets, no posts, no cryptic captions, no reactions, just silence. And in today's media climate, silence rarely reads as neutrality, especially when Funky adds a final, calculated detail, one that reframes everything. He claims Tamar didn't simply allow the public to turn on him. She amplified it. She let the image of him as the villain live on. He recalls being labeled a bad friend, a clout chaser, someone who should have stayed with her, gone upstairs, protected her. Then he delivers the line that cuts through the noise. "I didn't need to go upstairs," he says, "because that lady's husband went upstairs with her." The way he frames it isn't defensive. It's evidentiary. He isn't explaining himself. He's drawing a line. He wasn't the one who crossed it, he was the one who stepped away. When Funky describes the aftermath, feels less like venting and more like testimony. The insults, the attacks, the way Tamar's supporters flooded his mentions while she portrayed herself as someone who nearly died. He remembers it all clearly. "That lady went upstairs," he says. "I went home." What shocks viewers isn't just the clarity of his memory, it's the restraint he claims he exercised. Funky says he stayed silent while being dragged publicly. He didn't respond, didn't defend himself, didn't correct the narrative. And that's the point he returns to repeatedly. You knew I was holding all of this, he says. You knew and you wouldn't leave me alone, says. You knew and you wouldn't leave me alone. That framing changes the entire video. It no longer feels like an outburst. It feels like a reaction. A consequence. 2 months of silence finally breaking under pressure. Betrayal not just from one person, but from two. And that's where the pain becomes evident. Funky insists this was never about headlines or revenge. It was about friendship. He says he was genuinely Tamar's friend. He didn't want to do this. He didn't plan to. He still feels hurt. Still feels misrepresented. Still believes Tamar orchestrated a narrative and let him absorb the fallout. And it's in that emotional space that a dangerous word resurfaces across the internet. Arrested, not as fact, as possibility. Because now the betrayal has a name. Now the triangle feels real in the public mind. And once that happens, the questions multiply. What really happened that night? What happened in that house? What happened upstairs? Funky keeps circling back to the same details: Tamar's teeth, the blood, the refusal to call an ambulance. He says he didn't go upstairs, but someone did. 2 people did. Mendeecees and his friend. And whether anything criminal occurred or not, the mystery has grown too large to contain. Fans begin demanding answers. Influencers post breakdowns. Twitter fills with threads calling it the next major celebrity implosion. On TikTok, phrases like Tamar teeth mystery start trending. Some clips rack up millions of views within hours. And all roads lead back to one name: Mendeecees. Was he cheating? Was it consensual? Was it physical? Was it harmful? No one knows. But Funky's account is too specific to ignore. The locations, the movements, the lap, the kiss, the silence. Tamar's health scare. Yandi's absence. Together, they form a transcript that offers no closure. Because at the center of it all, one contradiction remains unresolved. If Tamar truly almost died, as she once implied, why didn't she explain how? Why refuse medical help? Why say she didn't know what happened? And why does Funky seem to be the only one holding a version of the truth, however incomplete it may be? At this point, the story stops being gossip. It becomes a case study in narrative control. What happens when someone pushes a story too far, then loses control of it? Once whispers turn into movements, once names trend alongside words like arrested, there's no reversing the damage. Not for Tamar, not for Mendeecees, and maybe not even for Yandi. When Funky's tone drops into something calmer, colder, it's clear the gloves are off. He's no longer defending himself. He's documenting. Every detail becomes a breadcrumb. Every pause, every location, every interaction is logged. Viewers aren't just watching, they're reconstructing. The discussion shifts from drama to investigation. The story no longer lives solely in Tamar's interview. It exists across timelines, podcasts, reaction videos, and whispered group chats. And slowly, the central figure changes. It's no longer Tamar, it's Mendeecees. And behind him, an even quieter storm. Yandi's name surfaces again. Funky mentions her only once, but the impact is seismic. The only person who was done wrong in this situation is Yandi. That line fractures the narrative. Because while Tamar and Funky exchanged indirect jabs, Yandi said nothing. Silence again. And audiences begin interpreting it as admission. Some believe she knows everything and is protecting herself. Others think she's only just discovering the truth in real time. Either way, sympathy grows. But sympathy isn't resolution, especially when Funky recounts how he walked away from the house that night, not out of indifference, but discomfort, especially when he repeats the detail no one else will clarify. Tamar was not alone upstairs. Mendeecees and his friend went in with her. What followed was never explained. Instead, the internet was left with fragments. Funky's testimony, Tamar's vague interview, an earlier post referencing blood and confusion. Everything else was filled in by viewers. And that's what makes it dangerous. Funky doesn't sound hysterical. He doesn't exaggerate. His voice is steady, tired, deliberate. Less like a blogger chasing clicks and more like a witness recounting events. And that's where perception tilts. Tama are described uncertainty. Funky described structure. A night that began at Ruth's Chris, detoured to Sauce in Buckhead, rerouted to V12, and ended at Tamar's home. Each stop etched clearly in his memory. Each decision carrying consequence. His central claim never changes. Tamar wasn't betrayed by a friend. She curated a performance and let him burn in the process, and still no denials. Not from Tamar, not from Mendeecees. Not from YANDI. In the absence of facts, the audience builds credibility from detail, from emotion, from history. Old clips resurface. Appearances are cross-checked, timelines compared, and a separate narrative rises. One Funky never states outright, but implies again and again what happened to Tamar's teeth. He mentions it briefly, saying if anyone knew, it would be the two men who went upstairs with her. He jokes sarcastically, but the curiosity only deepens. Tamar spoke publicly about injury, about blood, about nearly dying, but never the cause. No names, no report. Just ambiguity. Funky argues that ambiguity wasn't confusion. It was choreography, a strategy designed to stir chaos while avoiding accountability. And now that strategy is unraveling. What began as suspicion of cheating has evolved into something heavier. Patterns, repetition, discomfort. Funky admits this wasn't the first time he noticed the dynamic between Tamar and Mendeecees. He never liked it. He just never said it out loud until now. That silence cost him. Once Tamar framed herself as a victim without clarifying the truth, Funky became the villain. Blamed for leaving? Blamed for not protecting her. Blamed for not speaking sooner. And now, months later, he's finally responding. Not to start a war, he says, but to end the performance. By the time his monologue closes, one thing is clear. This wasn't petty. This wasn't a feud. This was the collapse of an illusion. And if Funky's account holds even partial truth, the public is no longer watching for drama. They're waiting for fallout, for statements, for accountability. Because in this era, silence isn't neutral. It becomes the narrative. And until someone breaks it, the speculation will keep writing itself.